Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very, very special edition of Anchor Watch. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I am joined with the man who I have admired for years, both in uniform and now out of uniform. Uh, Former Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, a man whose life of service speaks for itself. I could go through the many, and I mean many, command tours he had, to include commanding officer of U.S. Army Europe forces. And as someone who just left Berlin, um, seeing that for the first time, the history of what you had to command, what you were entrusted with, sir, it's eye watering. So thank you for joining us today.
Bobby, it is great to be with you, and I'm going to return the same kind of kudos and compliments to you. You've had a great career as well in service to the country, and I am proud to be with you on Veterans Day because I really like the Navy for 363 days of the year, and, and we'll talk about that other day someday soon. Okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll wrap up with that. But
Okay.
I just wanted to get you have had such an experienced career, both tactically, operationally, eventually strategically. You have been all over the world, different forces, and you've dealt with and served under many different commanders in chiefs, STEC defs, combatant commanders. What have you thought of the last 10 months, just overall, of the second Trump administration? Because I've told my viewers and listeners this is unprecedented. And it's not just me, there are others that think that. So I just want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, Bobby, you know this from a standpoint of someone who's a professional, that the military obeys civilian authority. That's what we do. We take an oath. We support and defend the Constitution. We know sometimes we may not agree with the civilian bosses we have, but we obey them as long as the orders they give are legal. Um,
Mhm.
what we've seen over the last 10 months or so are some very confusing strategies, some strange policies, some bizarre actions, and probably some leadership approaches that you and I would normally not recognize within our services. We both the Army and the Navy and all the other services study leadership. We know what it takes in terms of what you're supposed to have in terms of attributes and competencies and the way you influence people. And we also know about toxic leadership and how you turn organizations off and how you counter a culture versus build one. So if I can speak from the standpoint of a retired officer, what I'd say is I'm concerned about some of the things I've seen. I'm very
Mhm.
concerned about some of the things that they have done, especially the I don't know what category to put it in, whether we call it forced retirement or
Mhm.
lateral moves or not lateral moves, but for some of our best and brightest, the most recent one being Admiral Halsey out of
Yep.
Southcom, which to me that was probably while the other ones were really uh, I have trouble sometimes thinking of the right words to use.
Mhm.
While all the previous ones, like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the commandant of, or the chief of naval operations, the commandant of the
Right.
Coast Guard, those were surprising.
Right.
But you have to say, okay, well, a president can pick who and what he wants in terms of various offices. But when you talk about a guy like Admiral Halsey from Southcom, who who 9 months into his command tour, his first command tour as a four-star general, who says, I'm going to retire, to me, that sets up warning signs. There's something more going
Yes.
on. And when you then combine that with the firings or the replacements of the staff judge advocates, the inspector generals, some of the vice commandants, where you see the muzzling of the Pentagon press corps, when you hear about the military officials in the Pentagon being told that they may have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which is completely unnecessary. These
Exactly.
things, and I can name many more, these things start to not be a one-off. They start to be a pattern. And that's
Mhm.
what's concerning to me, because if you wanted to design, and I'm not I'm not passing conspiracy theories here, if you wanted to design a way to harm the military forces of the best country in the world, this is the way you would do it. That's what's concerning to me. And by the way, Bobby, I mean, I'm sure you know a couple of the folks who have been asked to retire or
Yep.
resign or move.
Hmm.
I'm sure you know a couple of them. I know quite a few of them. And some of them are some of the best soldiers that I ever
Yes.
knew and worked with. Like I'm talking about Lieutenant General D.A. Sims was one of my commanders. J.P. McGee, who was just
Hmm.
asked to retire last, I think, 2 weeks ago, was
Hmm.
a three-star general, was one of my battalion commanders in combat, and he was one of the three best commanders I had in a covey of about 30 of them. So you just have to question what the hell's going on, and that's the only way you can say it.
General, I couldn't say it better myself. Admiral Halsey um, he's a mentor of mine when I was active duty. He was like, "Hey, this is what we need to do." So to watch him make that decision, knowing how hard he worked to get there, like you said, 9 months into your command tour as a 4-star, it's unprecedented. It's
Yeah.
unprecedented. But
Well,
at the same time,
if I
yeah, go
can,
ahead.
let me share
Yeah.
something to your listeners because they may not know this from the standpoint of 3 and 4 star generals, not just
Hmm.
3 and 4 star generals and admirals.
Hmm.
We are not selected for promotion. We are selected for position. And you have
There you
to
go.
serve in that position for X amount of time in that rank in order to, retire at that rank.
Exactly.
So Halsey was in his first 4 star billet, and serving there for 9 months does not allow him to retire as a 4 star general. So he will
Exactly.
retire as a 3 star.
3-star.
And he was, from everybody I talked to in the Navy, and you're confirming this, he was literally one of the best and brightest they had.
Very much so. Very
Yeah.
much so. Very much so, sir. And I'm glad you brought that up. People are like, oh, well, why would he do this? For you to basically retire or rank less than what you properly earned says something. And here's the other thing, sir, that we might want to highlight. A lot of positions you mentioned, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, chief of naval operation commandant of the Coast Guard, those are 4-star positions, but they are not the ones that deal with the operational forces, right? They do
Right.
the man, train, equip. Southcom, just like Northcom, CENTCOM, INDOPACOM, those 4-stars are the ones who are responsible for the actual trigger pullers, as they would say. The
Correct.
actual fight, all those ships that are amassed off the coast of Venezuela directly reported to Admiral Halsey. So this is a different aspect where he's doing the actual kinetic war fighting in that position as opposed to the strategic dealing with Congress and all the administrative stuff. That's why this is so shocking to me.
Yeah, and I'll add one more to that too, Bobby, and that's the fact that as the Southcom commander, he's not only in charge of the forces, but those combatant commanders are responsible for their footprint, their area of operations for other
Yes.
governmental agencies that are inside. And what
Bingo.
triggered a response from me, and I'll connect a couple of dots here, the admiral retired or said he was going to retire just a few days after the president announced the covert actions of the CIA inside of Venezuela. And
Hmm.
Admiral Halsey, as the Southcom commander, that's his footprint. So if things are happening with the CIA that he may or may not have known about,
Right.
I'm sure he probably had the reaction of, "What am I, chopped liver? I don't know what's happening here," or better
Yeah.
yet, "I know
Yeah.
what's happening, and you're telling the world that this is happening. Why don't we kind of keep this in the classified realm if we're going to do
Right.
covert operations?" So all of these things, to me, signal some things that just aren't supposed to happen.
One of the things that jumped out when you were going through the timeline of all of these actions, the press corps being removed, all of these things have one thing in common to me. It is the reduction or the removal of accountability. To take out the head JAGs of the big three services, to sit there and get rid of the inspector generals, to get rid of the press corps, those are instruments of accountability.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That keeps everybody accountable to the American public, to Congress, to every other organization, what's going on. To actually have an NDA in the Pentagon is the most mind-blowing, stupid thing I think I've ever heard, sir. In all due respect, what would be the point of that unless you're paranoid that someone's going to find out you're doing something wrong?
Well, here's what I tell you. We kind of do already have an NDA. It's called secret clearances, and
Yes.
every officer has one of those. So it again, that's I wrote a piece about this saying why the heck are you looking for an NDA when you've got people with secret and top secret clearances who are in positions of trust. It doesn't make and by the way, as long as I just use the T word of trust, this is
Hmm.
what a lot of this is all about. But
Hmm.
I'll go you one further in what you just said, Bob, and that's it's not only what is happening, but it's why it's happening. Is it
Right.
is it another attempt to co-opt an institution? Number one, but secondly, uh, allow that co-option of the institution break the trust with the people who are watching it. I mean,
Mm.
what we're seeing and what I'm getting on a daily basis are messages from civilians on Twitter or Blue Sky or LinkedIn saying,
Hmm.
"How come you guys aren't doing anything about this?"
Yes.
And
Yes.
the fact of the matter is, that's not what we do. We obey
Right.
civilian orders. It's up to you
Right.
all to hold people accountable in the Congress and in the court system. We obey orders unless they're illegal, and then we say we're not going to do it. And there are
Exactly.
indicators that those are happening.
Right. And sir, the pushback has been up and down the ranks. I still know people who are in and dealing with it. I get texts and emails like, "What are we doing?" This, that, and the other. And the reason I'm so adamant on speaking out is because you and I both know they can't say anything, right?
Right.
But there's this other piece of this too, the systemic nature of how they have gone about trying to reshape the Department of Defense, from the name to our alma maters being basically reined in from critical thinking. And I was just in Annapolis about a week ago, to all the way up the chain of command. There is this concentrated effort to think less and just react to the civilian authority more. The fact that we're not taking part in the Aspen Security Conference, the fact that we're not taking part of these think tanks around the world that help sharpen, especially officers, their connections, their framing of how to view certain situations around the world as a global force, is mind blowing. I don't understand how anybody who is really concerned about national security could advocate for such a policy.
Well, I'll go that one further and tell you about a personal experience if I can. So I'm
Hmm.
I'm an old guy. I'm class of '75 from West Point. So we
Hmm.
have this program, and I think the Naval Academy has something called links, but we have a program
Yep.
called affiliation program. So our
Yep.
class of '75 was connected to the class of '25, which just graduated. So for the
Right.
last 4 years, we have been providing uh, speeches, fireside chats, connections, mentoring with the cadets. And I had a chance to go up there a couple of times. And by the way, I should say this up front. Lloyd Austin is my classmate. So
Yes,
he
he
was
is.
up there quite a bit too.
Yes.
And Secretary Austin is just an unbelievable human being. So you
Mhm.
talk about the shift for the cadets that are seeing that kind of
Mm.
leadership to someone who goes up and talks about, well, I won't go into what I saw in terms of the president's speech at graduation, but it was less than
Mhm.
inspiring. And it was to a group of people who 20% of the class are women. And
Yep.
they're basically being told, yeah, your time with the service is tenuous. And
Yes.
the class president, who's a good friend of mine, is
Mhm.
concerned. I mean, this is a woman who got a Rhodes Scholarship, and
Yep.
she's like, do they still want me? And she's the best of the best. So it's not
Mhm.
only the staff and faculty of the academy who are being very careful and making sure they meet the commander's intent of the commander in chief and the secretary of defense, but they are not being as bold as we would like our officers to be in terms of decision making. And it's
Right.
being reflected down into the case of the Naval Academy and the Military Academy into the cadets and the midshipmen. And I don't think we want a new generation that isn't bold or audacious.
Right.
I think we want folks who will, understand what intent is all about and then make things happen. And I don't want our young folks thinking about, well, what happens if I do the wrong thing and I get in trouble? That's not
Yep.
the way you and I grew up.
No, sir. No, sir. Along those lines, I got to get your opinion on this, since we're talking the Quantico speech, the Quantico gathering. Now, I'm a history buff. I mean, I really love history. I was like, did this had this happened before? Maybe World War II, unprecedented again. And then to watch, and I'm gonna say it because it needs to be said, to watch a man who, you know, alleged abuser, freaking could not get his Ranger tab, did not hold, company command, all of these things that he could not do, running two nonprofits into the ground, to sit there and to talk the way he talked to all of you, not just the stars, but the senior enlisted that has forgotten more than that man knows about operations. It boiled my blood to my core. It took everything. And then I went online and I went off on it. Lots of millions of views because I was angry. The unmitigated gall. And one of his supporters hit me up and General asked me, well, he has the right to do this. How's he supposed to speak to his generals and admirals? How about you go to them? They're busy. He could travel the world like you always do. Secretary Austin did that. Many cats have done that before because it wasn't about the showmanship. He basically wanted to dress down people that held him to a standard while he still wore the uniform. And it bothers me to no end. I just need to get your take on this.
I will take the opposite view. And I won't disagree with anything you said. But what I will say is I was proud of all those generals and admirals and senior enlisted advisors, that they kept the poker face. They portrayed the fact that they understood the civil military relations was, okay, this guy's the boss. We'll let him say what he's going to say. And the reason I'm smiling a little bit, Bobby, is because when I was a brand new baby one-star, I was the chief of war plans in my first and only tour in the Pentagon. And we had Secretary Rumsfeld, and he would at times berate people too. Yeah. And in fact, one of the best officers I've ever met, a Marine 3-star by the name of Greg Newbold, was the chief of operations, and said something on a press conference where the Secretary of Defense, the late Secretary of Defense, came in later and made fun of him for the word he used, saying, gee, I didn't know Marines knew those kind of words. Well, Greg Newbold was one of the smartest guys and one of the bravest guys and one of the most courageous guys I've ever met. And to take that kind of abuse from a civilian leader, it just shows that respect should go both ways. And I think what we saw at the Quantico brief, whatever we want to call it, was the uniformed military were doing what they should have done. They paid respect, listened intently. Now, what I can't say is probably what was going through their minds, because I know what was going through my mind. And I'm not sure, I'm not much of a poker player. I'm not sure my facial expressions would have given me away in that place. I would have tried my hardest to be like the rest of them. But I just see that the way the flag officers and the senior enlisted handled that session was extremely professional. It showed a loyalty to the Constitution, and in my view, that session was a reflection of how poor the leadership was of the senior civilians in the department, and the president, for that matter. I mean, I don't want to knock the president. I'm not going to knock the president, but he left a lot to be desired in that speech too.
Yep. It seems like these have become makeshift wannabe political rallies instead of something to inform and inspire.
It doesn't seem to be. That's exactly what they're trying to be. And here's a point on that too, if I may. Again, the flag officers and senior enlisted advisors were great. When I went to the graduation at West Point and watched the class of 25 graduate sitting less than 10 yards away from the president, they were terrific because they had been reminded beforehand, got to stay professional. What really infuriates me is how the department and the administration takes audiences and manipulates them, like they did with the 82nd Airborne. So both of us share this as an Army Navy guy. I share it from the 82nd Airborne. You share it from, was it the Truman Strike Group? Norfolk Strike. Yeah. What was
down in Norfolk? Yeah.
What was the carrier?
It was
Washington.
It was Washington. Yeah. Got them all. Yeah.
The Washington Strike Group, their leaders need to be pulled aside and say, hey, how come your sailors were like that? Same way the 82nd Airborne generals should be pulled aside. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where, we've got to uphold the faith of the American public on what the military institution is all about. And there have been attempts at showing them caving in these so-called political rallies. And there have been other instances where they've done pretty well. So it's a mixed bag right now, I think.
General, let me get you out get you out of here on this. This has been an absolute joy and pleasure. It's Veterans Day. You mentioned that your West Point class is 75, same as Lloyd Austin's class. As a matter of fact, your class is pretty dang established. On a day like today, what made you want to do this, to put on the nation's cloth and stay in so long to do what you were able to accomplish and still are doing, even out of uniform? What motivated you to do it? Because I get this question a lot. So I'm asking someone who's been there and done that even more so than I have.
Well, I mean, this is easy. Come on, you got to think it's a harder question than that. It was those young 18 and 24-year-olds that we worked with on a daily basis that
Yep.
had the potential and the desire and the selflessness to all serve something bigger than themselves. Now, you know this, Bobby. I mean, you were an officer in the Navy. There's a bunch of knuckleheads in that 18 to 24-year-old category too, but they're fun.
Yeah.
And they mean
Yeah.
well. And they're young men and women who just sometimes do dumb things, a few of them, not all of them, but there are some gems in those groups of every year of the young people we have in our force. So that was number one. Number two, what I'll tell you is a quick story. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I had never left the town of St. Louis. I had never been on an airplane until I was talked into by a guidance counselor at my high school to apply to the military academy. So that was the first time I ever left the city on an airplane as a 17-year-old. Since then, I've been to, by last count, 123 different countries. So for me personally, it was not just the people, but it was the adventure and the continuous challenge of doing new things that put some stress and turned up the rheostat on me, so that on a daily basis I could try and aspire to something better. I was just talking to Nicole Wallace on MSNBC. I did an article today on the Bulwark about Veterans Day. And I took a different approach. I didn't want to talk about thank you for your service and these guys are great. What I talked about is something that two of her guests had said on her show. And I told her this, and she was surprised by this, but she was the inspiration for this article I wrote, because the article was all about these two guests I saw on her show, where they were talking about, I don't even remember which policy failure it was, but two of the guests were talking about something that was just an abomination. One of the guests said, this isn't who we are as a nation. The other guest said, this is exactly who we are, and it's who we've been since the founding. It's just showing through in this current administration. I take umbrage at both of those. And what I'd say is, on a daily basis, we have to choose who we want to be as a nation. And this freedom and liberty and independence thing just isn't given to us. We've got to work for it. And when we find someone standing in our way, and when someone's doing something wrong, then it's up to us as the people, let's go back to the we the people sort of thing, have to say, this isn't who we aspire to be. So that's what fires me up on a daily basis is, and the other thing that fires me up, excuse me just a second, I have a box on my desk, and I've talked about this a lot. And it's a box on the top of it. I don't know if your viewers can see it, but it says, make it matter. Inside the box, if I can open it without spilling it, are the cards. Well, let me pull one of them up. Let me pull just a couple of them up. Are the cards of 242 young soldiers, a couple of Marines, a couple of EOD Navy techs, and one Air Force, and one soldier from a different government, from Lithuania, who served under my command in combat. And those cards in this box represent the guys who gave the last full measure of their devotion. They're killed in action. And on a daily basis, I pick one or two of those out and think about where they would be today after being killed in either 2004 or 2007 when I was in Iraq. And they haven't sat around the kitchen table with their parents or their loved ones or their wives or their husbands. And so to me, and a couple of others, General Marty Dempsey, who was my division commander at one time, we decided on this motto of make it matter. So what we've got to do is make their death matter in the grander scheme of our country, to keep aspiring to be better and to make a better life for our citizens and to defend them according to the oath we take to the Constitution. So if those three things, the soldiers, the challenges, and the people that fought and died for our country aren't enough to fire you up on a daily basis, I don't know what can do it.
General, I couldn't put it any better myself. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't think of classmates, shipmates that are no longer here, and why I'm outspoken. You know, retirement was supposed to be easy, but unfortunately, you know this better than anybody else. When the nation needs you, the oath doesn't have an expiration date.
Right.
It doesn't. And so, hey, whatever you need, all enemies, foreign and domestic, I said I'm going to be there. My wife, an Annapolis graduate, she said she's going to be my brother, an Air Force Academy graduate. He said he's going to be there. This is just what you do. And trying to explain it to some of my high school buddies is a little weird, but I think you summed it up better. We have to make it matter. We have to make it matter. Even if the people who are giving you orders don't understand that concept, it's on us to make sure that they matter. So to round this up real quick, because I can with that 2021 Army uniform vest you have on, it is really cool to see the Service Academies doing well in football, but we both know the game that matters here that's coming up here in December. And I'm just going to say this now on record. I think Navy will win the game, and it's going to cap off one of the top 5 seasons Navy's ever had. Unfortunately, we got to go through you guys, and I root for you guys. I rooted for you guys against Air Force this past week, much to my brother's chagrin. But it needs to be said, this whole, okay, we're all even again. No, we're not. Navy's a much better football team. Not going to say it's a better service, but we have variety. And I just wanted to say that to you, sir, because I know you're a big fan, and I see you wearing that First Division shirt, so I just wanted to point that out.
Well, let me come back at you a little bit, my brother, and say that last year, Army was going into that game undefeated and had a chance to, have a guy who was possibly he came out of the number 5 voting on the Heisman Trophy, which was pretty cool. And so that's the thing about the Army-Navy game. And people who don't understand it. But you could go into this thing like Navy probably will at 7-1, what are they, 7-2 now, right? 7-2?
Yeah. 7-2. Yeah, we'll win out, though. Yeah.
If they
we'll
win
go in
out,
there probably only 2 losses.
If they go in, that would be 9-2 or 10-2, 10-2, and Army loses all the remaining part of their games, it's still going to be a bloodbath. And that's the way they are, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. As someone who got to play in that game 4 years being on the team, I tell people, even going into combat operations, I've never been more nervous in the Army-Navy game than anything else in my life. Marriage, getting married, all that. The Army-Navy game was the most nervous I ever felt in my entire life. But General, I cannot thank you enough for your continued service to our country, the motivation, your continued mentorship, and helping the average American understand what we do in uniform and why it's important. I cannot thank you enough. Yes, sir, it is.
And it's the same thing you're doing, Bobby, and thank you for doing it. There's got to be that translation to the American public, because less than 1% of them serve and they don't know what the hell we're doing. So we got to talk to them about it and use living room language when we do it, right?
Yes, sir. Make it very simple. Make it plain. Thank you. Thank you again, General, for joining us.
One last thing. Can I say
sir.
one last thing?
Yes, sir.
Navy. Beat Navy.
Come on, man. Beat Army. Come on.
All right, have a good one. Thank you for having me, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Bye-bye. Just a very, very big honor and a pleasure to have the good General on. I mean, as someone who served a lot while he was still on active duty, his leadership became very, very legendary. The way he dealt with his soldiers, that's the type of leadership you want. And it's no coincidence that he's able to talk about things where the American public will understand it and how he's approachable. If you ever followed him on social media and stuff, he takes the time to answer legitimate questions. So that being said, that's a good setup for what's going on currently and continuing to connect the dots. So I'm going to ask our executive producer, Miss Susan Demas, to come in. How are you doing, young lady? Oh, wait, oh, can't you muted? There
Thanks
you
so
go.
much for having me. I'm taking the place of Sam Osterhout, who I am a poor imitation, but I'm happy to be with you, Bobby.
No, no, and hopefully you got to catch some of that interview with General Hertling. I tell you, he does a very good job of explaining the why to everybody, to the common denominator. Uh, and it kind of leads to a couple of observations that I've had this week, and I wanted to see what your initial thoughts were. It's reported now that the USS Gerald Ford, which is our newest aircraft carrier,
Right.
has now entered into Southcom. Now, if you heard what General Hertling said about the Southcom commander, Admiral Halsey, stepping down, this is part of probably the reason he's doing it, to send a carrier strike group with an amphibious ready group that has 2,500 Marines ready to go, a surface action group of three different what we call crew dead ships, cruiser destroyer ships. There is a massive buildup that's happening. Um, I don't know. You talked to various people throughout the week, Susan. What are the vibes that you're getting about this particular piece of the administration's strategic, I guess, outreach, if you want to call it that, to our friends down there in Venezuela?
Well, I feel, Bobby, like this is one of the many stories that isn't getting enough coverage. I mean, first of
Hmm.
all, the fact that um, the U.S. is just attacking ships down in the Caribbean. I think at this point, I've heard around 80 deaths. This
Hmm.
is something that our Secretary of War, as he calls himself, Pete Hegseth, is defending and saying we have every right to do. Um, this is clearly, a buildup even further. And it's very concerning. And this is at a time where we know that our economy is weakening. Trump is probably never going to be at the zenith of his power the way he
Hmm.
is today. I mean, he won the
Right.
shutdown, and I don't know if we want to just go
Yeah.
into that a little bit.
We need to talk about that too. Yeah.
Took a victory lap today at a veterans, memorial, which is true Trump fashion. Instead of remembering those who served, he made it all about himself and the political victory. But it seems like we are marching ever towards a real conflict in Venezuela, and that's of great concern. I also,
Hmm.
because I spend a lot of time talking with people more in the domestic sphere. So it's just such a joy that I get to
Hmm.
play Sam tonight. Um, it seems to me that there's like this de facto agreement that Putin, Xi, and Trump have worked out about spheres of influence. And it seems like
Yes.
South America and Central America, that's what Trump has agreed on, that's going to be our sphere of influence. Putin gets Europe, she gets Asia, and this
Hmm.
is all part of that. And so
Hmm.
I will leave it to you because you are the expert.
No, so you're connecting the dots beautifully here, Susan. You're absolutely right. And when you look at what is dominating the news as far as international relations, it's not Ukraine, it's not Taiwan, it's not the South China Sea. It is this, the buildup, the strategic shift. I will say this again: we have not seen a national security strategy released by this administration. That's supposed to happen every 4 years with each president. It's supposed to align the United States priorities, especially in defense and its military. Haven't seen it because they're not following historical tradition. They're doing this on purpose. The other piece of this too, and I'm glad you brought it back to the domestic piece. You're having all of these ship movements. You're having all of these forces shift, and you have no Pentagon press corps. So there's no one there every day to beat down the door and say, "Why is the USS Gerald Ford there? What are the intentions? Where is the proof that the people that you're killing, as you're calling them, quote, narco terrorists, are actually that? Where is it? And with them out of the building, and with Hegseth wanting to have them sign the NDAs that General Hertling and I just talked about, all this ridiculousness, there is a removal of accountability. Now, when you take just the forward and its movements down there by itself, you're like, okay, it's military. But then when you start connecting the dots to everything else that has happened here, from the government shutdown to the tariffs, to the White House being renovated, to all of these major multi-billion and million-dollar operations, and Congress is supposed to be the nerve center for it, and we don't see it, it makes you pause and say, what the heck is going on? What you're seeing is an unprecedented consolidation of power under one branch of government without any guardrails to it. And because of that, we're watching a man who has by far enriched himself dramatically in 10 months. It made his first tour look crazy. But most importantly, you don't have accountability for the military, you don't have accountability for the economy, and you don't have accountability to basic domestic law. This is what scares me. I don't know if I'm overreaching by saying this, but the one thing I do know is no one's stopping anybody.
Right.
There's no balance. There's no check.
Right. I mean, think about the fact that in the past, during the Obama administration, we had so many hearings about 4 deaths in Benghazi. And you know what?
Yep.
That is, they were politicized. Yes, it was clearly a weapon for Republicans into the 2016 election. But we are supposed to have accountability when we are, when we lose people, when we are accountable for deaths like we were in the Caribbean. It's supposed to be up to Congress to probe that. Right now, we don't have a Congress that is using they refuse to be a check on Donald Trump's power. Right now, I was kind of racking my brain as to who is a military expert in the House of Representatives. Who would I turn to? And there are a few. There are so many fewer than there used to be, especially on the Republican side, because so many of them have been replaced by people who are talking heads, like your Lauren Boeberts and your Marjorie Taylor Greens, instead of people who wore the uniform or at least have some expertise in that area. And it shows. And it's very dangerous because, we know that elections tend to be determined because of domestic issues. But right now, we are seeing an aggressive foreign policy from Trump that I don't think was on anyone's radar a year ago when he was elected. I don't think anyone thought that we were going to be blowing up boats in the name of going after narco terrorists.
Still there, Susan?
I'm still here. I'm sorry if I cut out.
No, it's fine. You froze a little bit, but no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's quite amazing because this is amongst one of the lowest percentages of congressional veterans that we've had in our history. And people need to understand that. Going back to the first Congress, right? All those guys were Revolutionary War vets, and you had these waves of significant numbers. Now, and this is what's fascinating to me, because of the rise of Trump in the talking head social media sphere, typically what should be in Congress right now should be a bunch of global war on terrorism vets, a ton of them, a ton of them, based on the timeline. Because, and I'll tell you why that's important. The reason Richard Nixon was going to be impeached and removed from office is because you had a Congress that were World War II, Korea, and Vietnam veterans. And they were like, and some of them, all three. Some of them, all three. And they were like, I'll be damned if we did all of this for you to be tyrannical as president. And so the Senate majority leader of his party walked from Capitol Hill to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue the night before he resigned and told them, hey, we have the votes. You will be removed from office unless you resign, period, and walked out. Could you imagine Thune doing something like that today? No, because they never put anything on the line to be on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
They don't know. And when you see the most outspoken people for these things, it's veterans, Democrats and Republican veterans have spoken up here recently, like, what are we doing?
Right.
Because they understand. And so, me personally, I know it's Veterans Day. I tell people all the time, I think it should be a prerequisite. If you want to serve in Congress, you have to serve in some federal organization, whether it's CIA, FBI, military, something where you had to give of yourself to the government and the people before you represent them. So you understand what's at stake. I think it should be a prerequisite. But no, now any businessman, anybody that has a bullhorn can go up there, and this is what we're dealing with. Susan, the other thing I wanted to bring up, Congress is the House of Representatives is going to have to be called into session to formally end this government shutdown.
Yeah.
But before I hit that, can you please explain to me what the hell happened in the Senate where this is now a thing? Someone, please. It's like someone ripped their backbones out and threw it over to the side and said, we're done.
Right. And this came just days after Democrats ran the table in elections from New Jersey to California. And this certainly is not what people were voting for. This, if you look at the polling, this was not a great vote of confidence in the Democratic Party. The party's, approval rating is still low. But this was a vote against Donald Trump and his policies, and a vote for people who could be a check on his power. And what did those 8 senators do in over the weekend? They threw all of that away. And so, as somebody who's covered, the government for a couple decades, I mean, the idea that Washington groupthink, that's real. You spend too much time on Capitol Hill only talking with lobbyists and your donors and other senators and media types. And there really is this idea of like, yeah, all we need to do is compromise. And, there really is this fierce belief, I think, amongst people in the Senate that we still are in somewhat normal times and we are going to behave accordingly. I don't think that's the majority of the caucus, but enough to stop the shutdown. And if you look, this is a very calculated group of senators. Nobody is up for re-election.
No one's up for re-election.
You have 2 people retiring. Dick Durbin is one of them. Everybody else is up in 28 or 30. They didn't want to face the music. But there is no way this happens without Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, blessing it. This was not a rogue action. This was blessed by him and by many others who voted no, but wanted to see this happen. I think that there were some good instincts in that people were definitely suffering. It's absolutely unfair for 40 million people to go hungry because they don't have access to SNAP. That is a tragedy. It is unfair for government workers, I believe a third of which are veterans, to be asked without a check for over a month, while Congress gets to go on vacation and Donald Trump gets to enrich himself. Totally unfair. That's a good instinct to try and stop that suffering. But what about all the suffering that was never attempted for the Senate to end? Tariffs that are hitting all of us, the actions that ICE and the military are taking in our cities like Chicago, where our president has declared war against other Americans, which, Bobby, I am sure was not, when you signed up to enlist, it was never to go fight other Americans. That was not the deal.
No.
And on and on. And so, I do think it is very striking that there have been so many voices amongst House Democrats where they have been calling out people by name and saying that they don't want the shutdown to end. Unfortunately, they don't have the numbers to do that as long as the Republican caucus sticks together. And it looks like the Freedom Caucus is going to stick and everybody's happy. Yep. Donald Trump has taken his victory lap already. But this was a really unforced error. And I think one of the biggest frustrations that I hear from people who, are across the political spectrum is, why can't Democrats just fight back? There was that autopsy that called Democrats woke and weak. And you can say that is derivative and it's unfair. But goddamn, Donald Trump
Yep.
did a great job of pinning them in a corner in 2024, and this does not get Democrats out of that. And so I think that it's really up to people like you who have the stature. You've put on the uniform. You have put it all on the line for this country. If people like you are willing to stand up and continue to fight for what democracy is, for what this country should be, then all of us can do that. And those 8 senators, they can follow the people because they're not doing their job right now.
Susan, one thing I did learn in 26 years of having a uniform on, leadership is hard. And if you don't want to do it, get the hell out the way.
Absolutely.
The reality is this. What they pulled strategically makes no sense.
No.
And tactically defangs them. Strategically,
yes,
you're taking the word of these people that, hey, we're going to have a vote on it, on SNAP and all this stuff.
A vote.
A promise of a vote. That and $5 will get you a latte at Starbucks.
Right.
Means nothing to me. Means nothing to anybody. You know damn well they can renege on that. But here's what I don't get.
Yeah.
When healthcare premiums go through the roof January 1st, when they are such where people are going to be literally making life and death decisions on how they can pay for this or maybe not have insurance, blah, 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 we are going to be in the same exact place with a CR, with a continuing resolution that does not take you any further anyway. So you lost all of your leverage. You just completely punted the electoral victories you had less than 2 weeks ago. And now you're telling the American people, we did this because they promised to give us a vote. And Chuck Schumer, I'm going to say this, and I'm not going to mince words, he needs to get the hell out of Congress now. Pelosi's retiring. He needs to follow her right. I mean, when I say now, I mean resign now. Don't wait till 26. Do it now. And have the governor of New York appoint your replacement. Because the fact that you're sitting there and doing this two-faced, like, yeah, we're going to fight, and you told 8 members, they picked him. They would not have done that unless he gave them the blessing, like you said, to do this. And the question I have for Chuck Schumer is simple. Why? Why? You've been in Congress longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
Explain to me why. And so now we're going to deal with this. We're going to deal with Trump, of course, the victory laps, blah, blah, blah. But here's what I don't see happening. I don't see a resolution to the Obamacare subsidies. I do not see any type of reform or any type of permanent, hey, SNAP will always be paid, even though there was a law basically saying that. And most importantly, all of this is a distraction for when the 218th vote to release the Epstein files happens here, which is ironic because the government shutdown can only end when the House is now in session. They have to seat, what's her name from, her name escapes me at the moment, but she was elected, 2 months ago? Hadn't been sat down. These two things could ironically be the downfall of Trump because they're going to vote to release those files.
They will. They will. But I think what remains to be seen is what kind of damage this is going to do into the midterms. I mean, look, things move very fast. I mean, who knows, Bobby, what you'll be talking about next week. We could have a full-blown war in the Caribbean. We don't know. That's life under Trump. But politics runs on trust. And how can any of us feel that we can trust these Democratic leaders when they, betrayed us like this? That was not the message that was sent from the No Kings protests on October 18th or the ones in June. That was not the message of the election. You have to twist yourself into knots to think that that was the message. And it just shows just how tone deaf, how out of touch these people are. And if you listen to them, I mean, Angus King, who's an independent from Maine, he's like, we learned that there was no way to fight Trump. What kind of a message is that?
You're a member of the U.S. Senate.
Meanwhile, we have grandmothers on the street of Chicago that are out there protecting their neighbors. And the senator from Maine is saying we can't do anything. If people give up on trying to win in the midterms, that is game over. That
Yep.
is that. I mean, this could be extremely damaging. And for those of us who, we understand that if you have a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate is a real stretch with the numbers. But if you have a Democratic House, there's a whole lot that they can do. I mean,
Yep.
a Democratic House impeached Trump twice already.
Mm-hmm.
But how can you blame people to say none of this matters? It doesn't work.
Right.
It's a real challenge, and especially from young voters who are really, really disillusioned, and all they
Yeah.
want is chaos.
It's funny you mentioned the young voters. I mean, the numbers that came out of this recent election were staggering, and they're looking at they'll never be able to buy a home. They're literally saying, I can't afford to buy a home, can't even afford to have kids, can't do any of these things.
That's Trump's new plan, a 50-year mortgage. That's affordability.
It's insane because he realizes, and even in his pre-dementia or full dementia state, that the numbers don't add up. So I've got to throw something out. So let me throw a $2,000 check at you and talk about a 50-year mortgage to try to offset a lot of this. Meanwhile, he knows all of his boys are collecting more money, making more money, and that gap is widening and widening and widening. The thing with the Democrats right now is they're failing the biggest open book test in the history of this country. They're failing it royally.
They are.
And here's my final piece on this. The suffering is going to have to be so great and so loud and so pronounced for them to finally get their shit together that I don't know if we can reverse the effects of this. If we go into the midterms, right, and these premiums are through the roof and this, that, and the other, and the Democrats still have not figured out the right message, it's over. It's over. You will not be able to afford to be an American. All of the things that we're seeing, the police state that they want, all of it's going to just sink in and become status quo like it does in other countries. And so on this Veterans Day, I tell people who worn the uniform and those who have not worn the uniform, General Hertling said it best. You got to be able to fight for your country. You have to stand up and say, this is not enough. And if the elected leaders are not going to do that, get new elected leaders.
Yeah.
Right. If you are in the state of New York, I want you to tell me how you can still have Chuck Schumer as your dang senior senator. Explain it to me. Like I'm 5, because none of this makes sense to me. When we're paying 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as much in healthcare premiums, I'm lucky. I'm retired military. I have retired military healthcare, but I served 26 years to get it and put myself in harm's way to get it. What about the rest of y'all? What about the rest of y'all? Congress, they have their healthcare. It's great. It's great. They keep receiving it while they kept getting paid, while many of my friends that are government workers are driving DoorDash, Uber, and all these other things trying to make ends meet. Okay? Schumer, tell me why you thought it was worth it. Those people are suffering. And here's the thing. When I talk to them, they go, I understand why they're holding out. They said that.
Right.
As they were making DoorDash runs, because you know what? They're worried about healthcare premiums. They're worried about affordability. And they realize, okay, if that means I got to suffer a little bit so we can make sure long-term, I'm fine with that.
Right.
And we just pissed it all away. So that's why I'm pissed off about it, Susan. It's like the sacrifice meant nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing. I just, to try to end this on a much better note, we have many of you who have written in, sent in pictures of your service, to our great nation. And yes, it may seem dark now. We've been through dark times before, and it's people like you who said it's not about me, it's about me helping everybody else. It's what pulled us out of it. And I have faith that we'll do it again. It may take a little bit longer than normal, but we'll do it again. And so what we like to do is end on just a steady stream of memories of all of you who have put on the nation's cloth and were able to do it. I personally want to thank you. I know how much it is to sacrifice. Like I said, my whole family's basically military, and it's hard. It's hard, but we believe, you believe, that the country was worth fighting for, protecting, and we're going to continue to do that. So, Susan, I can't thank you enough for breaking down, especially the domestic side of how this is. I just needed someone to explain to me why this is happening.
Yeah, I don't think I explained it very well because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I'm so glad to be here with you, Bobby.
I appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in this week. And thank you to Lieutenant General Mark Hertling for his wisdom and his continued service. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back next week. Hopefully things will be a little bit more saner. Hopefully we'll have actually good news to talk about. But until then, take care of yourself, and all those who are veterans, thank you for your service, and we'll see you next week.